Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to address the House today on Bill C-33, and I want to say I hope that members passed a productive summer in their ridings, and it's good to be back and reconnect with my colleagues on all sides of the House. Madam Speaker, this bill, on the face of it, deals with technical subject matter, Bill C-33 on port and railway systems in Canada. But I think this bill also exposes a philosophical gulf that exists between those of us in the Conservative Party and, frankly, all of the other three parties in terms of how they act and vote, if not how they always sound. The Liberals and their coalition partners in the NDP have an approach that emphasizes big centralized government that is constantly seeking to weakening the decision-making powers not only of private individuals but also of institutions that are supposed to hold delegated authority and act in response to local circumstances and respond to independent economic factors. Their agenda is a centralizing one, pulling that authority away from individuals in terms of losses of their freedom, but also pulling that authority away from institutions that are supposed to be able to operate independently. We have the Bloc, and I think this was demonstrated by the Speaker before me, wanting to rhetorically position themselves as being decentralizers. But in fact, if you look at the way Bloc members vote, you see their support for example, the Liberal carbon taxes, in particular the second carbon tax. And it boggles the mind that a party that on the one hand says they want to divide the country and make Quebec its own country is on the other hand supporting these kinds of from Ottawa measures that impose additional costs on Quebecers. So it's becoming clear that Conservatives stand alone when it comes to offering a different vision which recognizes the role, yes, of the federal government, but also the richness and diversity of experience and capacity that exists across this country, and therefore supports affirming the decision-making responsibility of other institutions, provinces, municipalities, in this case, port authorities, and recognizes the importance of having a multiplicity of different institutions that are making decisions that respond to those local circumstances. So this is an important bill in terms of the policy implications, but it's also an important bill in terms of the way that it demonstrates the way that a conservative vision emphasizing strong institutions, emphasizing respect for arms-length institutions and divisions of powers, emphasizing our belief in big citizens, if you like, as an alternative to big government, but also the role of mediating institutions. So this bill, C-33, is titled the Strengthening the Port System and Railway Safety Act in Canada. My preferred alternative title is Strengthening Liberal Control of the Port System. Not strengthening the port system, but strengthening liberal control of the port system. And it is on that basis, and for some of the reasons I've already indicated, that we do not support it. I do, in passing, though, want to extend my best wishes to the outgoing minister who tabled this bill and has, from what I understand, since announced his intention not to seek re-election. I know he's been in public life for a long time, and I wish him very well. So, Madam Speaker, for those that are not as familiar, how do ports function in Canada? Each port has its own board, and that board is able to act relatively autonomously. It's supposed to act at arm's length from the government. That includes electing its own chair, and it's supposed to be able to look at the the best interests of the port. It's supposed to be able to look at what is in the economic interests of the country, but also that particular region, and taking those local factors into account. And it's also supposed to be able to develop structures for engagement and consultation that while reflecting broad unifying principles, are appropriate to the particular local circumstances. The way that, for instance, Indigenous consultation happens at a port may vary depending on the particular local circumstances, such as the proximity of Indigenous nations and so forth. So this ability of ports to act at arm's length recognizes that one size does not fit all. It recognizes that expertise and local decision making and an understanding of local factors are very important in the case of port management and are important in general when it comes to government decision making. That creating institutions that can be responsive to particulars of local circumstances is important. And so this existing structure of ports is a reflection of that reality, and it stands in contrast with the liberal centralizing vision, a centralizing vision that I think is held, or if not held officially, certainly enacted by all of the other parties in this place, save for the Conservatives. And this bill seeks to make changes that bring ports to a greater extent under the domination of the central government, and this is where we obviously part company with the direction. I do want to say, in terms of the structure of ports, that members of ports are, though, appointed by the federal government. So there is a federal role making these appointments, and that does provide tools for influencing the direction of ports. But it creates a kind of balance that allows autonomous action, arm's length action on a day-to-day level, but still the federal government selecting individuals that they believe are appropriate. So the bill changes the authority structure in a number of ways. It makes the boards subject to ministerial direction, and it also allows the minister to appoint the chair. The previous structure was that the minister appointed members of the board, but the board would then elect its own chair, which again still involves a substantial role for the government, but gives the board more autonomy in terms of identifying the person that's best positioned to lead the board. But the new structure would involve the minister appointing the board members, and also from the board members appointing the chair. It would also make the board subject to ministerial direction, and it would mandate certain structures around environmental and Indigenous consultations. Obviously those considerations and consultations are very important, but the specific structures that may be appropriate can legitimately vary depending on the size of the port, the local circumstances, and they could well be matters subject to innovation and exchange of information rather than the requirement of standardization. So this is a centralizing Ottawa-knows-best, we know best type of liberal bill, and Conservatives are opposed to it. This is, in many respects, this bill is a missed opportunity insofar as there are, I think there are things that are important around how we could be strengthening our port and rail system, but instead the liberal approach to strengthening anything is to try to strengthen their control or their involvement in that particular thing. Madam Speaker, we are opposed to this expansion of direct government control over the ports for 4 main reasons that I will now proceed to discuss. They are, first of all, a general conviction about the importance of subsidiarity. Secondly, a concern about this government in particular expanding their management of things. Thirdly, the Liberal record on appointments raises some concerns about why the Liberals are trying to pass legislation to give themselves more control and more ability to shape direction through appointment. Finally, I want to highlight how scale differences matter at the port level, and there are particular reasons in this case why having a diversity of structures around how certain issues are engaged is quite worthwhile. So, first on the principle of subsidiarity in general. I subscribe to the general principle of subsidiarity, which means that decisions should be made at the level closest to the people affected as possible. Better decisions are made when the local experience of the people affected are harnessed, and this comes from a basic recognition, I think, of universal human potential for responsibility and creativity. That if you harness the views and experiences of more people who are directly involved in a situation, you will get better outcomes than if you have a smaller number of people or people with less immediate experience involved in that decision. I think a belief in subsidiarity flows just naturally from a belief in human dignity and therefore human potential for creativity. So I think our constitutional framework is designed to recognize the value of that subsidiarity, which is why we have not just every decision being made by the federal government, but we have areas of responsibility in terms of provincial jurisdiction. We have strong municipalities, and we also have arm's length institutions that act within the federal government. And subsidiarity is not incompatible with the belief that there are also certain kinds of decisions that are of a scale and a nature that do require larger levels of coordination or action by a larger entity, let's say the national government. The impulse to subsidiarity is not to say that no decisions should be made collectively, because there are certain kinds of things that the nature of the scale requires that action. And I want to point out in particular in this context that our conservative plan on housing does involve recognizing the need to push municipalities to do more in terms of actually getting housing built. And I think this is completely compatible with the principle of subsidiarity, because we see a situation in Canada right now where we are so far behind in terms of getting homes built. There is an urgency that requires more pressure to move forward, but also there has been a lack of appropriate sort of scale in considering the response to this, and you'll notice in the discussion of this, the Prime Minister has tried to, at certain points, say this isn't really my responsibility. This isn't something that I'm going to get involved in. But in fact, he has a housing minister. The government seeks to create policy on this. It's just that this government's policy has been effective. But still, in the plan that Conservatives have put forward, it's about pushing municipalities. It's about setting targets for them. It's about tying federal funding to commitments to move forward. But it's not about taking away that authority from municipalities or trying to micromanage specific decisions. It's rather about using the tools we have to create incentives and define what a national objective should be, and to reward them for moving towards that objective. So just to illustrate, obviously on certain areas there is a vital role for the federal government engaging, but there has to be, I think, a healthy interplay. And with the Liberals, I think the irony has been actually on some areas where the federal government needed to engage, they have tried to avoid responsibility. But then they have, at the same time, tried to intervene in areas rhetorically, if not directly, in areas that are very clearly not their jurisdiction. butting in, if you like, to things that are very obviously have nothing to do with the decision-making power of the federal government. And again, as it applies in the case of ports, we can see the importance of local decision-making and the impulse of the government to ignore the role of local decision makers and to move counter to this principle of subsidiarity, a principle that sadly they don't believe in their ideal vision of the world. All of the decisions that are of significance to this country would be made by a small group of people inside the Prime Minister's office without even harnessing the full energies of our national parliamentary democracy. I think that has had some dire consequences in many obvious cases. And on this point, I will move to the next point, which is the challenges with this government's centralizing impulse in particular, in a context where this government has demonstrated profound incompetence in all aspects of our national life. And I won't have time to detail all of these points, Madam Speaker, but in a context where this government is failing to do their job, is failing to make life more affordable for Canadians, have failed on environmental policy, on housing, on many other fronts, they are nonetheless persistent in saying, we want more control of people's lives. We want to be able to exercise more control and direction over previously independent bodies. I'll point out in one particular case the kind of on again, off again labor disruptions or the back and forth associated with that, and the harm that was done and the failure of the minister to resolve that situation as being an obvious example. On the issue of environmental policy, something that rhetorically we hear a lot about from the government, and yet this government is missing all of their environmental targets while using environmental policy as an excuse to impose new taxes. The way they talk about it, if you don't support their tax plan, you're against taking action on the environment. The reality is the government's tax plan has made life less affordable for Canadians, and it hasn't actually allowed them to achieve any of their targets. But sadly, we see all of the other parties in this House, the NDP and the Bloc, in lockstep with the government in their insistence on imposing new taxes. And this is a space in which the government is trying to take more control for themselves, again, telling provinces, you have to have a carbon tax or we will impose one directly from Ottawa. And it hasn't worked. So on many fronts, but also we could talk about their approach to passports. We could talk about their policy failures during COVID, about the fact that fewer houses are being built today than were decades ago, even when our population was smaller. We have a government that has across the board been either incompetent or malicious, and yet they are seeking more control over institutional decision-making through Bill C-33, and we're not prepared to give them that control. The third point I wanted to raise around this is that we have particular concern about the government's desire to use this bill as a tool for strengthening their power of appointment in terms of their ability to appoint chairs of boards. We have seen numerous stories about the flawed approach this government has taken to appointments, appointing donors or consulting supporter information before making important appointments, trying to whitewash issues by appointing people that have a close relationship with the Prime Minister. This is the way the government has approached appointments, and so you will not be surprised that there is no appetite on this side of the House to give the government more control over the appointment process when the current system, the election of a chair of the board by the existing members of the board, is working just fine. And in the dying minute I have, I will quickly make my last point, which is that obviously in terms of port decision making, scale matters. There are many different kinds of ports that have very different circumstances because of such massive variations in the amount of traffic that goes through them. And we recognize the importance of all ports. We want them to thrive and succeed in ways that reflect their local circumstances and the expertise of those that are running the ports, and that means avoiding Ottawa knows best, Liberal knows best, one-size-fits-all approaches to this. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, Conservatives recognize the importance of freedom, of local autonomy, and of subsidiarity. We reject the centralizing, we know best approach of the Prime Minister and of the other three parties in this House that are supporting his vision. And I believe that our alternative approach in opposing this bill and emphasizing local autonomy, expertise, and the importance of community-based decision-making is a much better approach and one that will be much better received by the Canadian public. Thank you.